Henry Ford is one of the most renowned entrepreneurs in history. He optimized transportation and forever changed the United States automobile industry. His innovative manufacturing process produced low-cost, reliable vehicles while simultaneously keeping his workers well-paid and loyal. However, it hasn't been a completely smooth ride for Ford. Henry Ford's failed attempts at starting the company to negative effects of the world wars and the challenging rivalry of muscle cars amongst others. Ford has had some eventful periods as an automobile company. Drawn from the past to the present, here are some things that you didn't know about Ford. In this video, we're going to show you 10 facts that you need to know about Ford. We're OnlyBrands, the channel dedicated to bringing you awesome, regular content from the world's hottest brands. Let's do this. Number 1. Ford's best. Ford has been responsible for manufacturing some absolutely wonderful, iconic vehicles. Let's start with the Ford Model T, aka Tin Lizzie, is probably the most famous, the most influential, the oldest, the coolest, and the most significant car ever made. Ford built 16.5 million of these no-frills, 4-cylinder cars over 20 years and sold them all over the world. The majority of these cars were built in Detroit and Michigan and were also put together at Ford's assembly plant in Manchester, England, and elsewhere. The car was significant because it was the first car that was affordable enough for large numbers of American workers. This meant that average people, not just the very rich, could own the car. The Model T's affordability was the result of advances in assembly line manufacturing techniques pioneered by Henry Ford. Thunderbirds are go. The 1955 two-door Ford Thunderbird came out 2 years after the Chevrolet Corvette and aimed to compete with the Corvette in the two-door sports car segment. In 1958, the Thunderbird's configuration was changed to a 4-seater, and Ford began to market it less as a sports car and more as a personal car. This made the original 1955 two-seater model rare and sought after. The car cost $3,147 at the time and was powered by a V8 engine with 198 horsepower. This allowed the car to go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 11.5 seconds. Not bad performance from 1955. Purchasing a mint-condition 1955 T-Bird today would cost between $20,000 and $60,000, which would come with both the hardtop and the soft top. This classic beauty is undeniably one of the best Ford cars ever built. Now, pickup trucks were made for hardworking people who needed a vehicle to work just as hard. The perfect illustration of this is the Ford F-150 SVT Raptor, a full-size pickup with major power. The first ever Raptor was the crazy fast version of the regular Ford F-150 truck and was powered by a 320 horsepower naturally aspirated 5.4-liter V8 engine or a 6.2-liter V8 engine that pumped out 411 horsepower, and both came matted to a 6-speed automatic transmission. The all-wheel drive truck can go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 6.9 seconds, and that can reach a top speed of an estimated 150 miles per hour. The SVT Raptor is not only fast, but also off-road compatible with big tires, dampers, and a wide body. Although the latest F-150 Raptor is powered by a V6 EcoBoost engine, word on the street is that there'll soon be another V8 powered one. And then there's the marvelous Mustang. It's still debated to this day how this beauty got its name. The possibilities include being named after the P-51 fighter plane, the Southern Methodist University mascot, or the Wild Mustangs of the American West. This wasn't the only name that was in the running for the name of this model car. Cougar and Torino were also possibilities, but those names would eventually be used for other Ford models. Mustang turned out to be the right choice because it's a car that's loved by many and respected by most. And what about the Ford GT? This is the most obvious choice for being part of the best Ford cars ever built. At around $500,000, it better be good. The supercar is powered by a 3.5-liter V6 engine with 647 horsepower, and might be only powered by electricity in the future. The GT can go from 0 to 60 in a mind-blowing 3 seconds and can reach a ludicrous top speed of 216 miles per hour. One surprising fact about the Ford GT is that its 3.5-liter EcoBoost engine is a variant of the same 3.5-liter EcoBoost engine used in the Ford F-150 pickup. The two engines have, of course, been modified to power these two very different vehicles, and the systems that support the engines are also very different. The Ford GT is sure to be a car that will grow in value, as it's very rare since only 1,000 of these cars will be built. More current, the most potent pocket rocket ever created by Ford, the Fiesta ST, but not just any ST, we'll be talking about the ST200. As the name would suggest, the ST200 is powered by a 200 horsepower turbocharged 2-liter 4-pot that sends all of its power to the front wheels. The only way to take the ST200 was also via a 6-speed manual gearbox. In other words, it was really centered towards those who are passionate about driving and love zooming down tight country roads. Only 400 of these little hatches were ever built, and every single one of them was finished in the same color that Ford calls storm gray. Number 2, last breath. Imagine having your last breath of your friend preserved in a test tube. Well, Henry Ford did. Henry Ford Museum was created to commemorate the Ford Motor Company and the ideas of American integrity and innovation. Among the items in this museum is a test tube believed to hold the last breath of Thomas Edison, Henry Ford's mentor and friend of over 30 years. While many people would want a keepsake in the form of a watch, a necklace, or a ring, Ford wanted something extraordinary to remember his friend. As a result, he asked Charles, Edison's son, to capture his father's last wind in a test tube. Number 3, Ford the Environmentalist. In the 1930s, some Ford factories were burning human and animal waste as fuel, but Ford was using biofuels before anyone knew what biofuel even was. He may not have even known it then, but he was a man who was wise beyond his times. He was setting an example that no one recognized, and it's too bad that no one else picked up on his actions. Still an innovator well into old age, Henry Ford debuted a prototype of a plastic-bodied car in August of 1941. Even more amazing, the car's body was biodegradable, with lightweight panels made entirely from soybeans. While Ford hoped to include the soybean panels in the production of Ford cars and trucks to lighten weight and lessen the cost of new vehicles, the outbreak of World War II sidelined the project. By the way, a lot of hard work and care goes into these videos, so if you could help us out and click the subscribe button, we would greatly appreciate it. Number 4, war effort. Many people don't realize it, but World War I was the first war that utilized motorized vehicles. Before that, supplies and people were moved via horse or manpower. One reason wars lasted so long. This war was a major shift in how daily functions were carried out in the field and military technology. During World War I, Ford took to the skies when he founded the Ford Airplane Company. Ford loved anything mechanical and wanted to do his part to help the United States military. While the company didn't achieve the success Ford had hoped, it did create the sturdy and now iconic Ford Tri-Motor plane, which was produced between 1928 and 1933. A Ford Tri-Motor even appears in the movie Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Henry Ford openly opposed the United States getting involved in World War II. He was in fact a staunch pacifist. However, despite these feelings, the war presented irresistible business opportunities that Ford gladly signed up for. Even before the US got involved, he built warplane engines for the British military. Once the Imperial Japanese Navy Air Service launched an attack on Pearl Harbor, Ford switched sides and decided to help the United States military by the end of the war. Ford built B-24 Liberator bombers, over 86,000 aircraft, and more than 57,000 airplane engines, over 4,000 gliders, and more than 277,000 armored cars, tanks, and jeeps. The company also built thousands of superchargers and generators for various uses. Number 5, and the worst. Okay, best of the worst. The 1988 Ford Festiva was designed by Mazda and sold under different names in different regions. The car was sold in Australia and Europe as the Mazda 121. When Ford decided to sell the car in the US market, they contracted Kia to build the car and called it the Festiva. The car was ugly and had very unimpressive features and performance specs. The top-of-the-line LX model Festiva listed a tachometer and cloth seats as special features, and the car only produced 58 horsepower. The Ford Pinto is universally considered to be the worst Ford of all, and possibly the worst car of all time. This disaster became notorious for its faulty design that caused the car to explode during low-speed collisions. Many of the victims instantly burned to death, and they became trapped in their melting cars. But the most damning part of this tragedy was that it could have been prevented. Ford had looked at 3 possible solutions to the gas tank problem that was causing these explosions, but never implemented them. One solution was the use of a rubber bladder liner produced by Goodyear. The second solution would have been to add an extra steel plate to the rear of the car just behind the bumper. The third option would have been the addition of a simple plastic insulator to the differential that would have kept the bullets from ever making contact with the fuel tank. As a matter of fact, any of these solutions would have prevented the tragic deaths that took place, and the third option would have cost less than $1 per car to install. The 1995 Ford Explorer is one of the most popular SUVs in the world, but is also one of the most dangerous. A Ford Explorer is 16 times more likely to kill the occupants of another vehicle in a crash situation than a normal family car is. In the 1990s and early 2000s, the Explorer made headlines over a deadly string of accidents. The accidents were triggered by tire failures, which caused the large SUVs to roll over. Over 700 people were injured, and more than 200 were killed in rollover accidents. In the USA report published by the Washington Post, it showed that of a sample of 25,000 SUV accidents, Ford Explorers were involved in more than double the number that competing SUVs were involved in. The worst part of this was that Ford company documents exposed in lawsuits proved that their engineers had recommended improvements to the SUV's design after it had failed rollover tests, but the company only made a few minor changes and proceeded with full production of the Explorer. Number 6. Ford's founder. Henry Ford made extra money as a pocket watch repairman when he was in his early teens. A mechanical genius from a young age, Ford taught himself the craft of watch repair by repeatedly taking apart and putting back together a pocket watch given to him by his father. He even made his own tools to work on watches, including tiny screwdrivers he laboriously filed from old nails and tweezers made from spring steel bones from a discharged corset. The genius he was, Ford designed and built his first operational steam engine in 1878 when he was only 15 years old. However, before he became the great man he's mostly remembered as, he worked for Thomas Edison at the Edison Illuminating Company in Detroit, Michigan. When he was 20 years old, Ford was promoted to chief engineer of the Thomas Edison Illumination Company's main electrical plant in Detroit, which provided electrical power for the city. He worked there for 6 years before Edison himself encouraged Ford to follow his dreams of creating an affordable, reliable gasoline-powered automobile. While at the Edison Illuminating Company, he became intrigued by gasoline-powered vehicles and started working on his dream of creating a horseless carriage. Ford was the type of man who was always into inventing and expanding his reach, and he ultimately held 161 different patents in his life. Later, the United States Centennial of Flight Commission recognized Ford as a pioneer in aviation. He shut down the operation in 1933 because of the lack of success, but at least he couldn't say he didn't try. Henry Ford was America's second billionaire after oil magnate John D. Rockefeller. Number 7. Compassionate, fair, and inclusive. The average wage for a factory worker was around $2.50 a day in 1914. Henry Ford increased the pay for his employees to $5 a day. No one had ever done that before. It was a move that would do great things for the company and for the employees who worked for Ford. The pay increase created an atmosphere of satisfied employees, which translated into increased productivity. This also allowed Ford workers to afford a vehicle, a product that they helped to build. More importantly, among many other innovations, what Henry Ford brought to his manufacturing plants was a willingness to hire handicapped people, including the blind, deaf, and those who had lost limbs in combat or in accidents. By 1919, more than 20% of Ford Motor Company's workforce had some form of disability. That was an especially juicy fact, right? I think that one definitely deserves a thumbs up. Number 8. Quadricycle. The quadricycle was the first vehicle that Henry Ford ever built. It was completed in 1896. The car was called the quadricycle because it had 4 bicycle wheels, a tiller, a gas-powered 4-horsepower engine, and a gearbox. Henry built the quadricycle while still working at Edison Illuminating Company. He utilized his free time, which was quite limited since everyone depending on their services called him when there was a problem. His interest was sparked after he had read an article in the November 1895 issue of American Machinist about gas-powered vehicles. Number 9. Vote for Ford. After being convinced he should seek a life in politics by his friend President Woodrow Wilson, Ford ran for a seat in the United States Senate in 1918. He only lost by 4,500 votes, even though he didn't spend a dime on his campaign. Number 10. The legacy lives on. The descendants of Henry Ford still control the Ford Motor Company, although they're only minority owners. They hold a majority of the boardroom voting power, but only a minority of the money. William Clay Ford Jr., a great-grandson of the company founder Henry Ford, is the current executive chairman of Ford's board of directors, a position he's held since January of 1999. The young Ford had successfully led the company through the 21st century. He believes and says that the purpose of the motor company is to enhance people's lives, and quite clearly, he's committed to doing just that. That was exactly Henry Ford's vision when he built the company in the early 1900s. We appreciate you sticking around until the end of the video, and we hope you enjoyed. But why stop now? Click these videos for more awesome content.